the shiurim over Yom Tov, and making sure that we are filled in so that everybody is able to keep up. This is today we are going to be covering Be'ezras Hashem the daf 10a and 10b. That's Yud Amud Aleph, Yud Amud Beis, which were the first 2 days of Yom Tov for the 15th and 16th of the month of Nisan, and we're going to start at the bottom of 10a-10b Beis, which is the beginning of the 4th parak of Maseches Shekalim. And for those that missed the other shurim, we'll be able to, please God, fill them in, be able to make sure that everybody can catch up. So starting at the bottom of 10a-10b Beis, the Mishnah says as follows. Beginning of the 4th parak, says the Mishnah as follows. Halacha Aleph Masnisin. Truma, with regards to the Trumas Halishka. What exactly did they use the money for? Meaning, what was the accounting? They would use that to buy the Timidim, the Korban Tamid, and the Musaf, all the Musafim, and Nichsem, and all of the wine libations that had to be poured onto the Mizbech. Ha'omer, which is very apropos to this time of the year, that was the Korban Ha'omer that was brought in the Beis HaMikdash, which they alechem, and the 2 breads that were the chametz breads that were brought on Shavuos, ve'lechem apanim, and the bread that went on the shulchan, v'chol karbanos hatzibur, and all other public karbanos, which the Korban Ha'edah points out here, la'atuyei kedaris, that includes the kedaris, which we have not yet listed here. And then the Mishnah lists Shemer Svichin B'Shvius. There were people that were hired to watch over the Svichin. Those were the shrubberies that would grow after the harvest was done. Erev Shvius, like there was stuff that would grow in the fields. There were watchmen that would watch those things. Noislen Scharen mit Trumas Halishka. They got paid. Their salaries were paid from the Trumas Halishka. Says the Bryce, says the Mishnah continuing, Rabbi Yossi says, if a person wanted to, they were allowed to volunteer to be a shomer chinam. Meaning, if you wanted to be, got semi-retired, he's learning in Kalal, he says, you know what? Instead of the Beis HaMikdash spending money on watchmen to make sure that nobody took or nothing happened to the Svichin, I'll volunteer my time, no problem. Says Rabbi Yossi, a person is allowed to volunteer their time. Amrullah, so the Chacham said to him, hold on a second. Afata Omer she'ein bain ella Michel, turning over the page, Michel Tzibur. You also agree that all of the things that were brought in the Beis HaMikdash, that were the Shekalim were used for, had to be from public funding. So how can it be that a person volunteers their time? That would be a private donation, and that would be not allowed since all things had to come from public funding. Says the Gemara at the top of Yud Amud Aleph. The Mishnah told us that this is Mishnah Maseches Taanis, that there were certain times that the Kohanim would come to make donations. There were certain specific dates that people would come to make donations. And the Mishnah fills in and tells us the story. Mishnah Taanis. When the Jewish people came back from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, there was no wood available in the Lishka at all. And a whole group of Jews stood up, the mishpachas that are listed in the Mishnah in Taanis, and they donated wood from their own resources. And they gave them as a gift to the public. And the Kohanim used that wood to bring the Korban Tzibur. And the Nevi'im that were amongst them made the following condition with them. They said to them, as in recognition of this incredible thing that they had just done, even if the lishka, the storehouses in the Beis HaMikdash would be filled with wood, and this chevra decided that they wanted, that they wanted to contribute their own wood, meaning they wanted to come, they wanted to like the mishpacha once upon a time did, that they wanted to make a Yom Tov and come up to the Beis HaMikdash and donate wood to the Mizbech, that no carbon would be brought without using their wood first, meaning that they would absolutely use the wood that was brought by these mishpachas. That seems to be a dead giveaway that this is a private donation. which seems to be what Rabbi Yossi was advocating for, and what the Chachamim in the Mishnah were saying is not okay. Amar Rabbi Acha de Rabbi Yossi. This Mishnah is clearly, obviously, the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who we saw in our Mishnah. The Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi says, because Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah says that if you want, you can donate your time as a shomer chinam, and this seems to be very clearly the same idea. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi, this is another Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Ilah, Rabbi Yossi says in the name of Rabbi Ilah, Divrei HaKolhi, that this is not a machlokes tanaim. Everybody agrees to the premise of the Mishnah in Tainus, that the families would be allowed to come and donate their wood to the Beis HaMikdash. Ma pligin, what do they disagree about? Begufay shel karban. They only have a machlokes about whether or not the gufay shel karban, an animal itself that is brought to the Beis HaMikdash by a private individual, that whether or not that could be used as a private, that the private property of an individual could be used as a public karban. But with all of the things that are machshirim, that are just things that enable the karban to be brought, like wood, everybody agrees that private property can be transferred to public property and be used for the karban sibur. That's the only machlokes. Tani was taught in a brisa as follows. If you have a woman that made a tunic for her son, who's the Kohen Gadol, Kashera, he's allowed to use it. He is allowed to use this ketanis, but she has to first donate it to public property at the outset. Meaning she cannot give it to him. She has to give it to the Beis HaMikdash. So the Beis HaMikdash will give it to him. Amar Rabbi Acha, says Rabbi Acha de Rabbi Yossi. This is once again clearly the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says Afarotzim is misnadev shomer chinam, because he holds that a person is allowed to make a donation of a shomer chinam. He's allowed to say, "I'm donating my time to the Beis HaMikdash." Rabbi Yossi, or Rabbi Asi, b'shem Rabbi Allah, says Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Allah. Divrei HaKol, once again, that this is not a machlokas. This is everybody's opinion. Ma pligin, where is there a machlokas with regards to private property? But gufay shel karban, only with regards to the gufay of the karban itself, the karban, whether or not a private animal could be used as a public offering. But when it comes to those things that are machshiri karban, things that are accessories for the karbanos called everybody once again agrees that you are allowed to make a private donation into a public donation when it comes to machshiri. However, you have the Amor Rabbi Yossi, who said in the name of Rabbi Ilah, seems to have a who wants to say that the only machlokas is machlokas with regards to machshirim. So our Mishnah seems to be we seem to have a brisa that disagrees with this opinion of Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rabbi Allah. Maseches peligi al Rabbi Yossi. Those families that donated wood to the Beis HaMikdash, they would make a yomtiv. They made a yomtiv on the days that their families had originally brought the karbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, the wood to the Beis HaMikdash. So those Yom Tovim existed in the days of the Beis HaMikdash, and even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, those families maintained their Yom Tov. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi holds that those Yom Tovim were only held during the days of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, the question is as follows. Says the Karban Aida. So what's the problem? Because Rabbi Yossi says, "Ain't nagim al b'shas hakarban." Shema min ad rabbanim pligi al Rabbi Yossi. You see that the rabbanim are clearly disagreeing with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Serving the naga afilu shalai b'shas karban, and they hold that they would make this yom tovim even when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And it's very clear that they hold that they still maintained their yom tovim of bringing wood to the Beis HaMikdash throughout the whole time. V'oid, And furthermore, min hadad Tanya, and from the fact that that this was taught in the Brisa, meaning the following: Amar Rabbi Eliezer Beit Rabbi Tzadok, says Rabbi Eliezer in the house of, or the son of Rabbi Tzadok, Anu Hayin B'nei Sinah ben Binyamin, we were part of that family of Sinah, the son of Binyamin. V'chal Tisha B'av L'Yes B'Shabbos, and Tisha B'av fell out on Shabbos. V'dachino Eis L'Motzei Shabbos, and we pushed it off to Motzei Shabbos. V'hayinu Mis'anim V'lo Mashlimim, and we fasted that day, but we didn't complete the fast. Why? Because the 10th of Av was the date that their family brought wood to the Beis Hamikdash, which means that the fact that their family ate on the 10th of Av that year, it indicates that their donation of the wood, which was the reason for their which was the reason for their for the Yom Tov, was not machshiri karban. It was a karban itself. It was a karban itself, and that's what they were celebrating. That they made a big deal out of this because it wasn't just machshirim; they were bringing it as a karban. And the opinion of Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rabbi Ilah seems to be disproven by this brisa. Okay, says the Gemara, and what comes out is that there is a machlokes tanaim whether or not you can make a private karban. You can bring a private thing that's not machshirim and turn that into a public karban. Said the Mishnah, this is the list of all the things that are bought with the money of the Shekalim. Leaving out the parentheses, says the Gemara as follows: Taman, there, Tanin, we learned the following Mishnah in Menachos. Kol korbanos yachid v'tzibur bayin min haaretz umin chutz laaretz. All the korbanos of the tzibur come from Eretz Yisrael and from chutz laaretz. You could have a cow, a sheep, a goat that came from Israeli goat or a Babylonian goat. Both of them are fine. Min hachodesh min yashin. You can use old crop and new crop. This would be obviously for the menachos. Chutz min ha'omer v'shtei alechem, except for the omer and shtei alechem, those things had to come from new grain and from Eretz Yisrael. She'ein bayin ela min hachodesh u min ha'aretz. Says the Gemara as follows. Rav Chuna b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, says Rav Chuna in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, der Rabbi Yishmael, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael, omer eina omer ba min asur, because Rabbi Yishmael was of the opinion that the barley that was harvested for the karban omer is not allowed to come from Syria. Meaning, this brisa that says that it has to come from Eretz Yisrael is obviously the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Taman taneinan, and we're going to see a further corroboration of this. We learned there as well in the Mishnah at the beginning of Maseches Kelim, that there are 10 levels of kedusha, and one of those levels of kedusha is Eretz Yisrael is mekudesh mi kol haratzos. Eretz Yisrael is more mekudesh than all other lands. Umay hi kedusha. So what is its kedusha? That there is a unique kedusha to Eretz Yisrael, that you bring the omer and the bikurim and the shtei alechem. They have to come from Eretz Yisrael. Ma'ashe'ein mivin mi kol haratzos, which you cannot bring from all other countries, all other lands. Soloveitchik, I believe, noted on this Mishnah. What do you mean? There's so many other differences between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz Laaretz, Trumas and Maseches, and all the dinim of Orla, and what about Shemitah, and what about Yovel? So those things are not Beis Hamikdash dinim. There is a kedusha that belongs to Eretz Yisrael, that is the relationship that Eretz Yisrael has to the Beis Hamikdash, and that is Shemivim Mimenu Omer Bikurim Shtei Alechem, and that's what the topic of the Mishnah in Kelim is talking about. Okay, says the Gemara further, Rabbi Chia or Rabbi Chuna, b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Rabbi Yishmael the Rabbi Yishmael Omer Eina Omer Bat Min Asura. This is once again the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who says that the Karban Omer cannot come from Syria. Taman Tanen, and there we learned Rabbi Yishmael says Ma Charish Rishus Av Katzir Rishus. So Rabbi Yishmael says that there are two malachas that are listed next to each other. The pasuk says, you have to rest with regards to plowing and with regards to reaping. Just like the charish is rishus, av katzir rishus, just like the plowing is also only when it is plowing that is something that you are doing because you want to. Av katzir rishus, so too reaping is only also. Reaping is only also if it is a rishus, but not if it's a mitzvah. Yatzak tzira omer shu mitzvah, which excludes the reaping, the harvesting of the karban omer, which is a mitzvah which we did on Shabbos in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, against the opinion of the tzedakим. who always maintained that the Pesach should always fall out on Shabbos, and they were very not into violating Shabbos for the K'tziras HaOmer, which is why the every time we did something against the tzedakим, so that we would repeat it 3 times. What am I holding? A sickle. What am I holding? A sickle. What am I holding? A sickle. What am I going to? I'm going to cut the Omer. I'm going to cut the Omer, because that was against the tzedakim, both in terms of the date and in terms of Shabbos. Rabbi Yishmael Kedate, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael consistently. Rabbi Yishmael, the Amar Eina Omer Ba Min HaSurya. Rabbi Yishmael is of the opinion that says that the Omer cannot come from Surya. Kedate the Amar, this is consistent with his opinion. Yatzak K'tzira Omer Shehu Mitzvah, that this would exclude the K'tzira Omer, which is a mitzvah, meaning it's only in Eretz Yisrael that you have the problem of harvesting during Shemitah, and that's where and he holds, based on that limit, that you also are going to harvest on Shabbos. Says the Gemara further. We learned before that we learned in the Mishnah that the people that are watching over the Sviche Shvius, the aftergrowths, the shrubberies, and the extra stalks and bushes that grow during the Shemitah, that they get paid from the Trumas Halishka. They get paid from the Shekalim as well. So the din is that in general, Shemitah produce has to be left to Hefker. It's not allowed to be guarded by the owner. However, these Sviche Shvius, these stalks that grow during Shemitah, need to be protected, because we need them for the Korban HaOmer. That's what we need. We need them to be there for the Korban HaOmer. So the Beis HaMikdash would hire these Shomrim to watch over specific Svichin for public purposes, so that nobody would come and harvest them, and then we wouldn't have anything for the Omer. Says the Gemara, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Once again, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who holds that it has to come from Eretz Yisrael. Otherwise, no problem. Just go to Syria or Babel or wherever and harvest the Omer. But he holds that it has to come from Eretz Yisrael. And since during a Shemitah year you can't grow anything, you would need to have people watching over these growths. Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef, no, this is everybody's opinion. If they couldn't find it in Syria, then they had to come and bring it from the Svicha in Eretz Yisrael. But yeah, you could bring it from elsewhere. You could absolutely bring it from elsewhere, but you had to have a backup plan that if there wasn't anything available elsewhere, then you would have available in Eretz Yisrael. Ask the Gemara as follows: would it be mutter to plant barley during the Shemitah year for the sake of making sure that you have a Korban HaOmer? This question was asked by Rabbi Chibar Ada in front of Rabbi Mana. He asked the following: is this not similar to the din where you have to, where in order for a kohen to eat the shiraim of a mincha, so he has to take a kometz, he has to take a scoopful of kmitza and put that on the mizbech, and then he'd be able to eat the rest of it. So what's the limit here? Says the Korban Ha'eda lo nimtza im nizru b'shvius. If it was planted in the 7th year, k'kometz al shiraim, then it would be like you were like a kometz al shiraim. It was like a scoopful that was that has been put in the mizbech to allow the leftovers to be eaten. She'en echol sha'arei shiraim asur b'achila v'kometz she'enu matzah shiraim la'achila enu kometz. So the din is that, in general, anytime that that the Kohanim wanted to eat from the leftovers, they had to offer a kometz. But if a kometz, if the shiraim were never going to be allowed to be eaten anyway, then the kometz wouldn't help at all. What's the comparison here? So it seems to be like in this situation as well, the kometz of the Omer that was planted during the Shemitah year would not be good, because the leftovers of it would be aser. Meaning, they didn't only plant an omer's worth of barley; they would have to plant something more, and anything more that you planted would be aser, and therefore the omer would be aser as well, and therefore you couldn't use it. That seems to be a simple answer. Amarle, so Rabbi Mana says back to Rabbi Chibar Ada, Hold on a second. We learned in Maseches Pesachim, the Mishnah in Pesachim, that there are certain things that are brought in a state of tumah but are not eaten in a state of tumah, and one of those things is the korban ha'omer. Clearly, what you see is that the korban ha'omer doesn't need to be mutar ba'achila in order for it to work. So just because you wouldn't be allowed to eat the korban ha'omer, because you wouldn't be able to eat the leftovers, the rest of the flour, because it was grown during Shemitah intentionally, so who cares? We know that you don't need it to be able to be eaten in order for it to work. Says the Gemara. Kate said, "Who also?" So, and that seems to disregard that question, and the Gemara seems to, I think, leave it as a question. It seems to be that it's left as a question. Do we paskin that it necessarily would be allowed to be planted the chatchila? So we know maybe it does, but it doesn't seem to be that we have a psak in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Kate said, "Who oisa?" So okay, so we know that the watchmen were paid from the Trumas Halishka. How did it work? Says the Gemara, "Noitel mas min al-shulchan." You would take money from the money exchange. I mean, the people that are sitting with the money, they're cash. They're changing money. And we give that money to the harvesters and to the watchmen. Actually, before the Omer is offered, meaning they're in charge of watching and harvesting and taking care of it before the Omer is offered. And then they would bring money when the time arrives to bring the Korban Omer. They bring the money from the Trumas Halishka, and they would then say that this money now is being used for the Korban Omer. They would pay for the Korban Omer, and then that money would then go to repay the money changes. So the watchmen and the workers would all get paid. The Beis HaMikdash would effectively take a loan from the money exchanges. When the time came, they would pay the people that they had already paid for the Korban Omer. They would say, "Thank you very much. We're going to be mechalel this money. We're going to say that this money now goes on this," and then they would then take their money and pay the people back. Says the Gemara, "V'tavasken, is that a good idea?" Hold on a second. That doesn't sound like a good idea at all, because the amount of money that you need for the Korban HaOmer, which is one measurement of barley flour, is a tiny amount of money. That does not meaning that doesn't make good sense, because the amount of money that you're going to pay for that Omer is a tiny amount, and you had to pay the guys a lot of money in order to go watch and harvest all the rest of it. I mean, the labor cost is extensive. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Ach b'Shem Rabbi Ba, Kol ma sheyitin hein dam mishar rishona. Says the Gemara, no, let's explain. Whatever is given now is the amount of money that they would pay from the beginning, meaning they would factor in the labor costs into the amount that they would then be mechalal on the Korban Omer later. Says the Gemara, Tana af bepische avanim kain. So too was the case with the masons that were building the Beis HaMikdash. Ketzad oiseh, how did they do this? Noitel mas mishulchani v'noisen lechatzim lesatim. They would take the money as a loan from the money changers, and they would give it to the people that were building the Beis HaMikdash, the carvers and the straighteners. Ad shaloy tinasan al gabe dimus, until the stone was put on top of the row of stones that they were building. Al hadimus, and when it was put there, maybe Maas Mitrumas Halishka, they would take the money from the Lishka, and they would use that money to pay them back. For Tavasken, ask the same question: is that a good idea? Says Rabbi Yosi, Beit Rabbi Bun B'Shem Shmuel, Kol Ma She Yitin Hein Damim Mishar Rishana, that they would factor in the cost already from the outset. And that was Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Turning over onto the next Mishnah, Daf Yud Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah as follows: Halacha Beis Maz Nisin. Paravasayim Mishtalach V'Loshin Shel Zahiris. Things that were required in the Beis HaMikdash. This is the Para Aduma, the red heifer, the Seira Mishtalach, and the goat that was used on Yom Kippur that was sent off the mountain, which is not a korban. Both of them are not korbanos in the traditional sense. V'Loshin Shel Zahiris, and the thread of wool, of red wool, that was used in the Beis Hamikdash that would hang from the top of the Beis Hamikdash, that changed to white when the goat was pushed up the mountain. All of this comes from the public funds of the Lishka. Keves Para, the ramp that was used to transport the Para and the Kohanim outside of the Beis Hamikdash so that they didn't become Tameh, the Keves Sira Mishtalech, and the ramp that was built for the Seira Mishtalech, and the Ish Iti, so that he didn't get harassed on his way out of the Beis Hamikdash. Velashin Shebein Karnav, and the wool that was between the horns of the Seira Mishtalech, Va'amas Hamayim, and the water canal, meaning the plumbing, V'chomes Ha'ir Migdalah, and the walls of Yerushalayim and its towers, V'chol Tzarech HaTzibur, and all the city needs, meaning all the municipal needs of Yerushalayim, by Mishiyari Alishka, they came from the remainders, from the leftovers of the Lishka. Meaning none of these are actual Korbanos HaTzibur. They are akin to Korbanos HaTzibur to a certain extent. These they are public needs, but they are not public korbanos. Meaning, as opposed to the part of the Seir Mishalech and the Lashon Shazaris, those are korban oriented. They came from the Trumas Halishka. These things were public needs, but they were not korbanos oriented, and therefore they came from the leftovers. Abishal says Keves Parav Kohanim Gedolim Ois Mishal Atman, that the ramp of the Paradim of the Kohanim Agdolim that would make the Paradim, they would build this themselves. They did not use public funds for it. Moser Shiari Lishka, the leftovers of the remnants of the Lishka, meaning which is another category of money at the end of the year. So you have all the korbanos were paid for, and then you have this shiarim, which is money that's left over at the end of the year, and then there's the moser of that, which is the leftover that the would roll over into the next year, meaning once everything else was taken care of, meaning you've used all your public funding, you've now taken care of everything that was necessary. What did you do with the surplus? Says the Mishnah, they would use that to buy wine, oil, and flour, which they would then resell, meaning they would use that to make more money. And whatever profits would be accrued, that was used as hektish divrei Rabbi Yishmael. This is what Rabbi Yishmael holds. Meaning that the Beis Hamikdash would have an endowment fund, effectively, that they would have money, that they would have excess, they would use that to do business. They would invest in certain things, they would resell them, they would make money. Rabbi Akiva says, "Ein mishtachim rishal hektish." We don't use hektish money to engage in commerce. Af loy mishal aniyim, and the same is true with regards to funds that are necessary for the poor. Meaning, you have tzedakah funds. You don't invest that in stocks and bonds. You make sure you keep that in the account and you give it out as necessary. What did they use with the leftovers of the Trumas Halishka? What did they use? So it says, what do they do with the surplus of the Shekalim once they had already taken care of all the korbanos tzibur? So rikuei zahav tzibur lebeis kodesh hakadoshim. They would use that to make decorative golden plates, that they would gold plate the inside of the kodesh hakadoshim. Rabbi Yishmael says Moisar ha-peros, the leftover of the fruits, the fruits that would be brought to the Beis Hamikdash, meaning produce that would be going bad, kaitz lemizbech, that would be used, literally means dessert for the mizbech, extra korbanos. They would offer it as extras. Moser truma, but the leftover of the truma of the shkalim, of the actual cash, the clay sharis, they would use that to purchase additional vessels that were needed for the Beis Hamikdash. New cups and cones and pans that were necessary for the mizbech. Rabbi Kiva says, "Moser truma leketz mizbech," leftover of the shkalim would be used for extra korbanos. Moser nesachim leklei sharis, leftover wine would be sold and traded for additional klei sharis, for more vessels. Rabbi Chananya, Rabbi Chananya, the assistant of the Kohanim, who we've seen a number of times. We met him in the big sugya at the beginning of Maseches Pesachim, first parak. Moisar nesachim kains mizbech, the leftover of the wine was dessert for the mizbech. Moisar truma, the leftovers of the truma, the klei sharis, they would use that for klei sharis, for new kelim. Zeh v'zeh lo hayu moedim b'peres. But both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chananya's Kohanim disagreed with Rabbi Shmuel with regards to Paris. They were not of the opinion that you could buy Paris, sell them, and then upsell them to make money later on. Okay, asks the Gemara as follows: the Keves, with regards to the ramp of the Paraduma, Keves Para, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan would say the following: Gimel l'shenesem. There were 3 strips that we need to talk about. Our Mishnah only spoke about 2, but there are 3 strips. Gimel l'shenesem shel seir. The one that was used for the seir mishtalech b'sela, that was the weight of 1 selah. Shel mitzora, which we didn't mention, shel mitzora is b'shekel. That needs to be a little bit heavier. Which needs to be lighter. That's shel mitzora b'shekel. That's lighter than a selah. Shel para b'shtei slime, and for a para adum it had to be 2 slime, because it needed to be heavy enough that that wool had to be heavy enough that it would fall into the fire, it wouldn't burn up and disappear. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chunya de Bras Chavrin, Rabbi Chunya of Bras Chavrin explains, in the name of Rabbi Ba bar Zavda b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, shel par b'shtei slime u'mechza, that the one for the paraduma had to be 2.5 slime. V'is de mafkin lishna ba'asara zuz. Now those that taught it that it had to weigh asara zuz, which is exactly the same amount as 2.5 slime, but they wanted to say it in the name of, I mean, in the same lashon as their Rebbe. Okay, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Shmuel, says Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel, Talmidei Chachamim melamdin esakanim hilchas shchita, hilchas kabbalah, hilchas rika, that they had to have Talmidei Chachamim to teach the Kohanim all the halachas of shchita and of kabbalah sadam and of zrika sadam, throwing the blood of the mizbech. You had to shecht it, and you had to collect it, and you had to throw it in the mizbech. All of these things. Who paid these Talmidei Chachamim? You had to have people teaching that got paid as well from the Trumas Halishka. They had to get paid by public funding. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Difa b'shem Rabbi Imi or Rabbi Amy said as follows: Me mevakrei mumei kachim nadlim schar mitrumas halishka. Also, the people that would examine the kachim to make sure that they didn't have any mum, they didn't have any blemish, they also got paid from the public funds. Rabbi Achar, Rabbi Tanchum bar Rabbi Chia bar b'shem Rabbi Simlai. They said the following: Ma higei sefer hazara. The people that would check the sefer Torah in the hazara would also take their wages from the from the Trumas Halishka. We have here some interesting results. What exactly the sefer hazara is? The Gross says it's the sefer hazara, the scroll of the courtyard. That was the sefer Torah that was supposed to be there, kept in the hazara, to be used as the standard for all other sefer Torah. There's another mahalach in this Gemara that it's not Sefer Hazara but Sefer Ezra, which was the Sefer that was written by Ezra that the Kohanim would read from on Yom Kippur, and probably for the same purposes. You had to have somebody that was in charge of making sure Sofrim that would make sure that it was kept up to date and that it didn't crack and that no letters were missing and that usage didn't fall into disrepair. Says the Gemara as follows. Gidel bar Binyamin b'shem Rabbi Asi. Gidel bar Binyamin said in the name of Rabbi Asi, Shnei dayani gzelus nodlin schar mitrumas halishka. There were 2 judges that were judges of thefts, meaning they paskened all questions of people stealing from other people. They got paid from the Trumas Halishka as well. It seems to be that's not bedafka talking about theft, but anytime that they would deal with dinei mamonos, so they were paid from public funding. The Chara that made sure that there was never a question of where they were getting their money from. Everybody knew where they were getting their money from, that they weren't subject to any kind of bribery. Shmuel says, Nashim ha'orgas beparoches nadin schar mitrumas halishka. The woman that weaved the paroches also took their wages from the Trumas Halishka. And Rabbi Chuna says, mitrumas bedek habayis, that the woman that wove the curtains were paid not from the Trumas Halishka, but from another bucket of funding, which was the bedek habayis, money, meaning the money that was used for the upkeep of the Mizbech, that was a different din. Says the Gemara, my Polig Shmuel, what is the point of this machlok? Ma Polig, what exactly is the machlok? Shmuel Avid like a carbon. Shmuel holds that the pareches has the din of a carbon. It's considered to be like a carbon, and Rav Huna Avid like a binyan, and Rav Huna held that it was like part of the building, and that's the machlokes. Amar Rabbi Chizkiah, meaning obviously it is neither, right? It's somehow or another both part of the building and something that would fall into disrepair and needed to be replaced. So it was it wasn't quite bedek habayis, but it also wasn't quite korban. Amar Rabbi Chizkiah says, Rabbi Chizkiah Tana Rabbi Yehuda, groy garos or good gados. We have different gesars, yeah. Haktaris v'chol korbanos tzibur ba'im trumas halishka. The Haktaris and all other public korbanos came from the public funds of the trumas halishka. Mizbech hazav v'chol klei sharis ba'im mimoser nesachim. But the mizbech itself, the golden mizbech, and all of the klei sharis, that came from the leftovers. Mimoser nesachim, from the leftovers of the nesachim. Mizbech ha'olah, the big mizbech, the big mizbech that was outside, that they burnt the korbanos, the animal korbanos on. Mizbech ha'olah v'ha'heichal v'azaros, the heichal was the inside section of the Beis Hamikdash v'azaros, and the courtyards by Mishiyari Halishka, the funds needed for that came from the leftovers of the Trumas Halishka. Chutz le'azaros, except for the chutz le'azaros, any area that was outside of the Azara, meaning any other area of Yerushalayim, by Milishkas bedek habayis, that funding came from the bedek habayis for all of the other needs of Yerushalayim. Says the Gemara further, Bahatani, but didn't we learn that with regards to the stones of the Mizbech and the Heichal and the Azaros, that there is Me'ilah by them? If you use them inappropriately, you have violated Me'ilah. You have violated Me'ilah. And v'chiyesh me'ilah b'shiraim, and we know that there's no me'ilah b'shiraim. We don't say that you have stolen from temple property, meaning that you've inappropriately used temple property with regards to the remainders. We don't say that there's me'ilah b'shiraim. Ella Reb Meir, it must be that this is the opinion of Reb Meir. The Reb Meir, Amar Reb Meir says ma'alim b'shiraim, that you do violate me'ilah with shiraim, as we learned on Daf Tes. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Chia, says Rabbi Chia, Klum Amar Reb Meir Ella b'sayich shnasai. Now, Reb Meir only said this within the year of donation. But we are talking about outside of the year of donation. And since we're talking about things that were outside of the year of the donation, so now there would no longer be me'ilah for that korban, and it would come from the shiraim. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Chizkiah, says Rabbi Chizkiah, Tana Rabbi Yehuda, God, this is the same Rabbi Yehuda, but the Gemara now calls him God Gados, which is what we had in the round parentheses earlier, but it seems to be the same fellow. Hashulchan v'amenorah v'hamizbachas v'hapareches, all of these things, the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbachas, the pareches, this is an unrelated din to what we've been saying, but it is by the same Talmud Chacham, so the Gemara is relating them. All of these parts of the vessel of the Beis Hamikdash, the shulchan, the table that had the lechem upon him, and the menorah, and the mizbachas, and the parachas, the curtain that was in front of the Kodesh HaKodashim, ma'akvin es hakarbanos. If they're not there, you cannot bring a karban. You need to have them. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say, ein lecha ma'akev es hakarban ela akir ve'hachein bilvad. The only things that are ma'akev are the kir, which you need the waters of the kir, and the chen. Now there's machlokes exactly what this girsa is supposed to be. The nusach that we have on the side of the page here is the hachi garsinan. So what the Korban Eidah has is the Hachi Ela Charkov v'Keren. What exactly is the Charkov, and the Keren? So these items, there was some kind of thing that surrounded the Mizbech, and that is the Michbar that was under the Charkov, and that's part of the Machlokes in Maseches Zvachim. and the keren is the horns at the sides of the mizbech. Meaning, the only thing that's ma'akiv is directly related to the mizbech itself. Other kelim are not necessary. That seems to be the gersa that the Acharonim take. Yeah, v'loi chen, and the Gemara then challenges this. Amar Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Amrin kol hein dichsiv noichach ma'akiv. Anything that the pasuk says noichach, that has to be noichach in front of, that is going to be ma'akiv. For example, that the menorah has to be noichach hashulchan. The menorah has to be next to or in front of the shulchan. So that would be ma'akiv. So tzela in ma'akiv, but whenever the pasuk says tzela, for example, shulchan titin al tzela tzafan on the side, that literally means rib, but al tzela on the side of, that's not ma'akiv. Va'amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan, says Shmuel bar Nachman in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, I feel it's tzela ma'akiv, tzela is ma'akiv. Tzela is ma'akiv, which all of this seems to be disagreeing with what we said here from Rabbi Yehuda good Gedos. Va'amar Rabbi Ilah, says Rabbi Ilah b'shem, turning over the page to Yud Amud Aleph, b'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. He says the name of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, I feel sima ma'akiv. Anywhere that the Torah says sima, that it should be put there, that is also going to be ma'akiv. So in all of these cases, the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, kan ba'avodas shebifnim, kan ba'avodas shebechutz. There is a difference here. There are avodas shebifnim. There are things that were done inside of the heichal, which is the shulchan, the menorah, the k'taris, and obviously that which was done in the Kodesh HaKodashim. All of those things, they would be ma'akiv, kan ba'avodas shebechutz. The stuff that was on the outside, all that you need is the mizbech and the things that the mizbech needs. We will continue later with Daf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph and Amud Beis. Trying to catch up and make sure that everybody is up to date. Looking forward, please God, to catching up and making sure that we are following along. Wishing everybody a good moed.